Village tales evolved from an era where customs and cultural beliefs formed the very fabric of day-to-day life in rural villages of Guyana during the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. As a child of a health visitor who served in many of these rural communities, I had the privilege of experiencing cultures raw and uninfluenced. Families responded to standard expected community norms, focusing on education, social development, religion, and healthcare. However, healthcare administration often proved challenging for my mother due to opposing customs, cultural beliefs, and expectations. My experiences as a child growing up in these villages have had a positive influence on my very resourceful personality. I will always treasure those years, never forgetting the intriguing stories that I have to share.
The Family Man by Monchoir.
Take your damn scamp, your eye pass me. You got woman with me? Take your bitch.
Shouted Pinky as she emerged, baby in arms, from the tent of zinc, the windowless shack that had been their temporary home for months now. Pinky went charging across the narrow bridge towards the main road, and without looking back, she quickly sought refuge in a nearby home. Echoing through the windy silence came the haunting sound of a man howling in pain. It was Paul, Pinky's husband. He came running out of the shack, a red, skin-peeled face he was thrashing about. He ran toward the main road of the village, self-proclaiming his plight to the inquisitive eyes peering from homes as curtains part, a glimpse to catch of the disturbance to the trust of the village peace. Confirming in witness, the familiar rush to the nearest hospital emergency room. Then came Esme, the trusted village news carrier, questioning as many as she can, so as to gather the news everyone eagerly awaited.
Pinky Bonham, she Bonham, she bon Paul in his face with that tile. He got sweet woman with she.
I pretended not to know, but a material witness I truly was. For many a day, as I sat in my favourite dungs tree overlooking their fence, I witnessed the tension escalate as they literally aired their dirty laundry out to dry. You see, the high noon sun would drive the family out of the zinc oven they called home. From noon till dusk, they would hang outside until the welcome of the evening cool. From the proximity of my dungs tree rest, I would witness the quarrels, the accusations, and the denials. For it was the village rumour that Paul had a sweet woman somewhere in the village behind, and Pinky was growing more and more suspicious and accusatory. Paul was not coming home on time. He would come home after midnight with claims of being out, playing dominoes and cards with the boys. In addition, he never seemed to have much money remaining after taking care of the weekly family expenses. Things were rapidly deteriorating, and Pinky was becoming increasingly impatient. She followed him after he left work one day. Paul had failed to recognise the shabbily dressed figure with a hat pulled down over the face, walking behind him and observing his every move. It was Pinky. She was in disguise and in full detective mode. Paul made a couple of stops. First he stopped at the rum shop and gaffed with the guys for a while. Then he began to check the time on his wristwatch. He seemed preoccupied, hardly listening to the guys. At 6:30 p.m, after a final glance at his watch, he stood up and left the rum shop. His next stop was at the local grocery store. He made a few purchases, including rice, flour, oil, and potatoes. Pinky felt some relief as she momentarily thought that Paul was buying groceries for the home. He was aware that they were low on some essentials. To her shock and dismay, Paul turned and walked in the opposite direction to the deep village where the sweet woman was rumoured to live. Pinky's blood began to boil. How could Paul betray her like this? How could he betray his family? After all she had done for him, how could he? Pinky continued to follow him. She was livid. She watched as Paul entered a yard that was overgrown with shrubbery and trees, hiding a small white cottage located towards the back of the property. Paul climbed the stairs and confidently knocked on the front door. His knock was answered by a beautiful young woman. Paul pulled her close and kissed her on the lips before disappearing behind the door as it closed. Pinky followed and found cover under the bottom house where she remained hidden. She kept asking God to give her the strength she needed to refrain from the outburst that was brewing deep in her soul. As she listened, she could hear voices, then the sound of a baby crying. Pinky was shocked. She heard the young woman say,
"Daddy is here, don't cry. Look, Daddy is here. Go to Daddy."
Then she heard Paul say,
"Come to Daddy, sweetheart, don't cry. Look what Daddy brought for you, a big lollipop."
Pinky covered her mouth with both hands to keep herself from screaming.
"A child? What?"
Pinky had to sit down. Her knees were shaking. She sat on the bare ground and leaned her back against an upright post. After a while there were sounds of dishes and spoons. They were eating dinner. So this explains why he would often make an excuse not to eat the dinner Pinky would lay out for him. He had another family. Oh, the betrayal. After much talking and kissing and dishwashing, Paul and his mistress retired to the bedroom. Pinky had to leave. She had to escape the loud noises coming from the floorboards above her head, the banging bed, the screams of ecstasy. Pinky slowly made her way home, tears flowing from her eyes, her heart in pieces. She felt numb. Paul arrived home later that night and noticed that Pinky was cold and silent and not responding much to his questions or statements. Resolute in her silence, no matter how much Paul pleaded, she would not tell him what was wrong. Many outdoor afternoons were spent with distant, tense silence between them. As the children slept on beds of rice bags, carefully spread beneath the sheltering branches of the surrounding trees, Paul would appear to be engrossed in sharpening his cutlasses, the tools of his trade. Pinky would bury her head in the mound of brown rice she was determined to pick. It was rumoured that Paul had come home late from work that fateful day, smelling of perfume and with a love bite on his neck. Pinky was about to fry some Bangor Mary fish for dinner when Paul arrived home, walked over to her and leaned forward to kiss her on the cheek. That's when she smelled the perfume and saw the bite mark on his neck. Pinky snapped, completely losing herself. She picked up the pan of hot oil and threw it in Paul's direction before making good her escape. Paul was gone for a period of time. He was hospitalized for third-degree burns to his face and neck. Not wanting to implicate Pinky, Paul reported that a kerosene stove had blown up in his face. He couldn't bring himself to cause further destruction to his family. When he was eventually released from the hospital, he tried to return home to Pinky, but she would not have him. He moved in with the sweet woman. The shame and disgrace that followed him was palpable. He was hardly seen walking in the village in the daytime. His face, though badly burnt, was not seriously disfigured. He was still his handsome self, except for some discoloration around his ears. The sweet woman was a new resident of the village who had moved closer to the office where she was employed as a secretary to the village overseer. She met Paul during his monthly visits to the overseer's office. What started out as simple smiles and blushes soon became a full-blown affair as Paul began to visit her cottage. After Paul moved in, the sweet woman soon discovered that living in the village was almost unbearable. She couldn't ignore the hints coming from the villagers at the market, the grocery store, and even in church. Everywhere she went there were whispers and stares. She reluctantly decided to leave and return to her home village. Refusing to leave with her, Paul was left alone to fend for himself, and soon the rumours and gossip began to fade. Then one day, to everyone's astonishment, a very contrite Paul returned home to join his family. Pinky forgave him and took him back. Oh, the rumours! Oh, the names! But Paul was steadfast in his game. He walked the straight line, worked even harder, and single-handedly began to construct the dream house as they had planned. When the beautiful home was completed, I remember having to look up from my dungs tree rest to catch a glimpse of Paul as he sat on his veranda, cuddling the new addition to his family, a baby boy.